Hey everybody, good evening. I'm Jen or Jennifer Freer. There's no Jenny. And I am your business librarian. If you haven't ever already met me or been introduced to me. And what we're going to do tonight in this class is walk through tax research using one of the RIT products that we subscribe to. It's called Checkpoint. We're also going to give some background on tax research because unless you've already done some other legal research, you probably don't have a foundation for understanding tax research. It's not like when you are assigned a marketing plan, a business plan, or a scholarly paper, even. When you're assigned, hey, go do a scholarly paper, write a thesis statement. Marketing is only good for blue-eyed people. Brown-eyed people ignore marketing. You go out and you look for articles, case studies, maybe even news articles, and you are grabbing bits of information to support your thesis. Sort of in the structure, what you do with a tax memorandum will be similar. You're looking for information to support your thesis, but you're having to look at documents you probably have never looked at before. The Internal Revenue Code from the United States, tax court cases where parties sued each other or were sued, revenue regulations that are updating not updating the tax code, but offering interpretation. So we're going to do a little background on that, in addition to walking you through what you see up on the screen right now is the info guide that I made available for the class. And off of this info guide, you'll have access to Checkpoint, the product that we're using. And this is a product a lot of tax firms use. There's 3 products out there that tax firms tend to use. And Checkpoint is one of them. And we don't get an academic version. We get the same version corporations buy for their accountants. The professor had asked everybody to make an account in Checkpoint. You're going to want to, hopefully you made an account, so you already have one made. If not, you're going to want to definitely make an account in Checkpoint. You can use it without an account, but for reasons I'll show, you're going to want to be able to save your research trail. And down below on this guide, there is Checkpoint account creation. Now, if you're asking yourselves, how do I get to this guide? There are definitely a couple ways, but you can always go back to your I left my phone over there. You can always go back to my courses. Now, of course, yep.
Okay.
It's in my jacket. I was trying to protect it from the rain.
Got it. And so while Jen is going through this, we have two sections of this course. And they're loaded up the same way, they got the same stuff on it. So I think we are the 440, 710, so if you see the course number doesn't quite look right, it doesn't make a difference, the 2 sections as you keep the same way.
And in addition to that being not exactly your section, what I'm navigating to will be in the same in almost every course, unless a professor really changed the toolbar that's at the top of the course. So let's go into the accounting one that I'm in.
That is the right.
Yeah. So you've got your toolbar on the top, and very rarely do professors customize this. And usually what you'll find is under the More button will be an RIT Libraries button. You've probably never seen it there because most people don't go in More. And so in this course, I've set up the library guide system to point to that guide. So if I click on RIT Libraries, because I'm sitting in this course, it goes to the info guide for the class. So that is one way that as long as you can get into my courses, you can get to the guide for the class. You can also navigate from the library website, from the info guides website. You can also get there, but you've always got my courses as your backup for that. Now, before we dive in further to Checkpoint, what we want to do is do the background piece of this around tax research. So my contact info, this slideshow is on the guide. It's on the bottom of the guide. You can also, if you want, and that's a URL to the guide. If you want to take a picture of this, feel free to take a snap a picture of it. This isn't the only time you get to talk to me. Questions are going to come up. You're not going to remember everything that I'm throwing at you right now, and it is going to be a lot. Email me questions, follow-up questions, new questions, clarifications, whatever. And I can also work with you in real time. There's a link there for appointments. So if you want to work in real time in person or by Zoom, we can do either. We could do that. I can also answer a lot of questions by email. I can also make quick videos. I make a lot of videos. So I can make quick videos with or without captions.
This being, I mean, they've got one, we're doing one session on research, they've got one project. So particularly for my folks who are not gonna be tax people in the future, this could be it. Use Jen if you're able, I mean, as you're doing stuff, if you got questions, we have a great resource here, so rather than you spending a lot of time for this one-off situation, spend some time, try to figure out what you need to figure out. If you don't get it, reach out. Don't wait until 4 o'clock next Thursday.
Yeah.
But do reach out.
Don't wait. Always do whatever you can early, right? 4 o'clock next Thursday. I tend to answer questions within one business day. But it's also possible the answer you get immediately is, oh, I got your question. I'll have to get back to you on Monday. No, that's not likely. I usually try to answer anything that's in my email box by Friday at noon before the weekend starts, because I know a lot of projects happen on the weekend. But whenever you need to start early for sure. Okay. So tax law. And I don't know how to minimize that little, the little toolbar. Sorry about that. And those people on Zoom cannot see the toolbar because it's invisible to you. Tax law. So, most folks are lay people who know tax law because they file income tax, in the United States and other countries. And they only know it from that point of view. What form do I have to file, or what is my accountant doing? But you, as students, and maybe some of you are future tax professionals, you're learning about tax from a completely different perspective, okay? So, and you also might be at different levels. We had a young lady in the other class, she's actually was working in an accounting firm and already worked in Checkpoint. She knew how to navigate it. She was navigating different libraries than I was showing, but she already knew the product because she's already working in a firm. But some of you may never even heard of Checkpoint, understood tax law other than what you've learned so far in this class. Okay, so there's some background there. Now, the first thing to understand is tax law in the United States, when it's generated, it touches upon the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Executive, think the president and his agencies. Legislative, think the US Congress. And judicial, think Supreme Court, but the specific judicial branch we're interested in is tax court that adjudicates tax cases. It is possible for tax cases to start in other courts and all end up in the Supreme Court. For the most part, we're going to show you searching in the tax court. So they've all got a hand in tax law becoming a thing. So we also have this other thing running, which is primary and secondary sources. Secondary, I should have put it on there, is also editorial sources. So primary sources are going to be the things that come out of originating bodies. A case that comes out of tax court is a primary source. The Internal Revenue Code that comes out of the legislature is a primary source, or out of the US Treasury is a primary source. So you have those, but then you also have secondary sources that help interpret or annotate or help practitioners and students understand, well, they said it this way, but really, what are they saying here? Okay, so you've got your 3 branches of government, and then we've got primary and secondary sources. So the legislative branch through the US Congress sets the very initial tax law through their legislation. They pass bills and the bills get passed, they become laws, and it becomes the IRC, the Internal Revenue Code, and the Internal Revenue Code is a primary source. The other thing to think about primary and secondary or editorial is primary sources have way more authority than secondary and editorial sources, okay? Think about if you ever were asked to read a novel, and you're like, okay, I have to read Jane Eyre. And then you were like, I don't have enough time to read Jane Eyre, and you found a site that just summarized Jane Eyre, right? That's the secondary source, and Jane Eyre is the primary source, okay? But if you get quizzed on Jane Eyre, that secondary source might not be really as authoritative, okay? So you got the legislative branch producing the Internal Revenue Code. And then you have the executive branch, which is the US Treasury, is providing what's called official interpretation. I can't get that out of there. Oh, there we go. The US Treasury under the president is providing official interpretation of the revenue code. What they're trying to do, and they are primary sellers, is help us understand how to comply with the things in the Internal Revenue Code. How do I comply with the laws that Congress made? But it's still a primary source. And then the judicial branch or the tax court, they rule on cases, legal cases where two parties go head to head, because not every situation that comes up in the US around tax law has been anticipated by the Congress or the Treasury. So for example, we're going to walk through a problem statement, and this is really what accounting firms do, tax firms do a lot of time, is they have a client, the client says, I did this, but the tax law doesn't cover it explicitly. Help me interpret what to do. And at some point, it's possible that some parties sued the IRS, or the IRS sued some parties to say, no, IRS, you got it wrong. I should be able to deduct all the hay I fed my horse. Because once upon a time, my horse was a working horse, even though it's a recreational horse. You never know what human beings will come into conflict around. So these are all primary sources that you're going to have access to. Oops. Then you also have these rules and regulations that also come into play that offer a little bit of extra further guidance for accounting professionals and lay people. So, so this is basically the definition off the Treasury site. In addition to the issuance of the tax code, the IRS publishes all these other official guidance. Some are revenue rulings, they'll become important. Some are revenue procedures, notices, and announcements, also primary. So the Internal Revenue Code ultimately is complex, and all of its sections must be read in the context of the entire code, the Treasury regulations, and the court decisions that interpret it. So when you're researching tax law to answer a tax question, you have to keep all of this in mind at the same time. That's part of the reason you want an account and checkpoint, so that you can hold all this research in there, so you don't have to keep popping in and out as an anonymous user and remember what you had gone to. And at the same time, you're helping yourself to understand, as you read these things, how the code relates to a few court decisions or with the regulations that happen. And right now, this is abstract to you, okay? Because you probably don't have experience doing this. But it will hopefully, throughout the next few weeks, really, you'll be able to come to an understanding about it, because this is about thinking. And you do have some sources that help get you there when you're looking at the IRC code, or even you're reading a case and you're like, I don't understand the opinion this judge came up with. And these are our secondary and editorial sources. So the two major ones that you're going to be involved with are the United States Tax Reporter and the Federal Tax Coordinator. And the United States Tax Reporter is going to offer summaries of federal cases and IRS rulings, and this will be organized by the code section and legal issue. So it kind of mimics the code sections for the Internal Revenue Code. The Federal Tax Coordinator is going to be helping to explain and examine the IRC code, tax cases, rules, and regulations. And they're going to offer in-depth analysis organized by subject. So these are two major secondary editorial sources. I'm kind of flipping in the word editorial now because Checkpoint will call them editorial sources. So you've got your primary stuff and your editorial stuff, and your tax research is going to involve looking at both of these types of research and content. And luckily, you have a source for that. So while you're enrolled here at RIT, you are going to have access to a database called Checkpoint. And Checkpoint, as I said, is the same database professionals are using. And what Checkpoint and its parent, Thomson, I think is its parent. Yeah, it's on there. Thomson Reuters is trying to do is they're rolling in publicly available info, right? But you don't want to have to go through the IRS website to look at the IRC code, because what they're doing in here is they're rolling in publicly available info. They're connecting it to all the tax cases they also have access to. They're connecting it to the license material they have from the USTR and the tax federal tax coordinator, and they're all connecting them together. So all these documents are talking to each other. So you can leap from document to document as you're trying to read things to ingest them in a cognitive way and then jump about. Because as you look at tax law, it gets really parsed down to individual. If this was like a study, a scientific study of food, it would get parsed out not just to the ingredients in a recipe, but it would get parsed out to the molecules in every little piece of food that goes in that recipe. So there's a lot of stuff you're going to put together. You'll lose access to this when you graduate. Okay. So enjoy it while you have it. Plus, if you are going in to be a tax professional, really get up to speed on this. Use this a lot so that on your resume, you can put, I'm familiar with Checkpoint. And then if you're interviewing with someone, they're going to want to know, well, how familiar? And you got to be honest, right? Like, well, I know how to get into it. I know how to search the federal library. I never had to search the state library, but I know my way around blah, blah, and blah. So think about, as you're preparing to go out there, if you're going into tax research, it's helpful. Because even if you know this product and the firm you're interviewing with has one of the other products, the interfaces will be different, but the organization will be the same. All right. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to look at a sample problem that the professor has given, and then we're going to give a little search demo and a little orientation to the interface. And then that's going to be followed by you guys going into Checkpoint. And even though if you haven't made your own personal account, you could still search inside of it, and you're going to search for information regarding the sample problem. Okay. So when you're reading a tax problem or a tax situation, you have to remember it's got tons of info in it, and this info can help start your research. So you're going to be looking for the facts, that set the scene. You're also going to see, usually in a tax problem, some assumptions that maybe you could make about the people or behaviors that you can observe about the people involved. That can sometimes help narrow down similar cases or situations. And then on occasion, especially if you're in a firm, you might be given some guidance. You might be told, hey, you might want to look at this case, or you might want to look at this section of the IRC code. Out in the real firm, that doesn't always happen. You sometimes are just given the facts of the case, not even the assumptions or behaviors, or you're sometimes given too much.
Right, so I mean, I've had situations where I've had new folks sit with me and we listen to a client. Clients are lovely, they pay our bills, right? But they often don't know what they need or what they want or what they're seeking. So part of our job is to try to interpret what it is they're saying. So in Jen's last point, we could get a ton of material, ton of information that's not really germane to the question that we're answering. So kind of cutting through and trying to identify the various elements is part of the learning experience we're having here that you can then take out with you when you go to public, once you account.
Yep. All right. So keep in mind, Tax research is not looking for one answer. This is not going into checkpoint and looking for the answer. You're looking at multiple codes, multiple cases, multiple regulations and rulings, and they are forming your recommendation. They are bolstering your recommendation you're giving to your senior partner to give to the client, okay? It's not, where is the thing on this one thing, okay? So, the sample problem. So this is an example of a sample problem. I'm going to break it down into the facts, assumptions, and guidance that I sort of just described. So the facts of the case in yellow. The facts of the case are that Bedrock Inc. is owned equally by Barney Rubble and his wife Betty, and each of them holds 1,000 shares in the company. Betty wants to reduce her ownership in the company, and it's been decided that the company will redeem 500 of her shares for $25,000 per share on December 31st of this year. Boom. Facts. Who, what, where, when. Some extra info provided, including assumptions and behaviors. You're going to assume that Betty and Barney are not getting along and have separated due to marital discord, although they are not legally separated. In fact, they can't stand to talk to each other anymore, and they only communicate through their accountant. Betty wants to argue that she should not be treated as owning any of Barney's stock in Bedrock because of the hostility towards each other. Okay, so not as hard as facts can be, but possibly important. And then the question to be answered: can family hostility be used as an argument to void the family attribution rules?
So I picked this problem because it's sort of akin to stuff that we've done. We've talked about attribution, who owns, who's deemed to own whose stock. So I thought, I think I mentioned to you that the Internal Revenue Code defines family attribution in 9 different places in the code. It depends on what the situation is. So I thought this would be a relevant case to put out there. It's something you've heard about. It's not the research problem you're all going to work on for next week, but it has an opportunity to show you how we go through facts, assumptions, question, and then go forward.
Perfect. So there is also included in this one some guidance. So on the bottom, we see the verb consult, and it's pointing us to what we're going to call citations. These probably don't look like the citations that you're used to seeing with an author, a date, an article title, a journal title. These are taking the form of legal citations, and legal citations are really compact. And legal in the first one, which says Rev Rule 8026, there's a lot of abbreviations at work in tax research. That's revenue, rulings and regulations. 8026, I don't even know exactly what 8026 stands for. A lot of times in the cases following it, the first number is the volume number, the last number is a page number. We don't have to worry about that. We just have to worry about what is the abbreviation to help hint us to what type of item it might be. And Checkpoint's going to have some citation tools where you can just plug a citation in to bring that specific document up. It's also going to have a way to search so that you can search by subject terms that you've come across. And in this case, the partner was very nice to give us the terms: family hostility, family attribution rules. Okay. So in the cases, each one of the cases starts with a name versus a name. So Haft Trust versus Commissioner. I think it's the Commissioner of the IRS. And then we get a volume number, volume 5110, Federal Register or Fed Second 43. Usually that's a volume number or page number, but you're not looking at these in print. You just need that to get the item to pull up. And then we can tell it was from 1975, followed by Metzger, The semicolons are cluing you in that it's a new citation. So we've got 3 cases, wait, 1, 2, 3 cases and 1 revenue ruling that we can work with. So how do you get to checkpoint? 2 ways. You get to it off of the guide, or you get to it, you can go directly to the database through this link. I'm just going to go to the guide. There's a link for checkpoint right there. I'm going to go in as anonymous. I'm just any general user can get in here. And it's like, hey, do you want to see about the Inflation Reduction Act? No, I don't. Thank you very much. So here's a general interface when you're just the anonymous person going in. I'm in the general account where you can't save anything. If I started doing searches, and yes, there is a little history bar here, but there's no history yet. But if I start doing searches and a history builds and I close my window, it's all gone. That's why you want an account, so you can save things, and you can actually save things in folders very nicely. So the product is built where along the top you get a toolbar about what major library or area do you want to search. For this course, we're only staying in federal. We're only doing a federal. We're not doing state law in this course. There's a little more button here. So you can also navigate using a table of contents. The table of contents is also on your left. There is a lot of like navigation points. It's like Microsoft Word. Control Find or right click or different ways to get in to do things, okay? Now, you could just start searching, but you also want to tell Checkpoint where you want to search. It's defaulting to searching the federal library. That's awesome. And you can't change that default right now unless you went up to state and hit state. The blue bar, Federal Tax Coordinator Analysis, it's kind of thinking this might be a good place to start. You might want to start in here, okay? But I can exit out and I could say, you know what? I don't want to start in there. I want to start in the other editorial materials maybe, or I want to start in the primary source materials. And whenever you see a plus sign, you can blow it out, okay? And you might say, I only want to start in the federal tax cases. That's not a natural place to start. Federal tax cases are more complicated. That's when you're getting down to the finer point. You're really trying to hone in on what you wanted to do. But you might say you want to start in the Internal Revenue Code, or you're like, no, I don't want to start in the primary. I want to start in the editorial. And the 2 that I mentioned were the Federal Tax Coordinator, and I mentioned the U.S. Tax Reporter. Notice USTR is not here. To get to the USTR, you have to navigate. Go to More, Table of Contents, Federal Library, Federal Editorial Materials, USTR. And if I click on it and I click on Income, I can navigate through it. But that's not a great way. So there's not an exact way to search inside immediately in the USTR. You just start searching in the other materials and it'll link to it. You can always navigate back to the home page, hit federal. Notice it didn't remember that I X'd out federal tax court. It really wants me to start in there. What I want to do right now is I'm going to sign out. I'm going to sign in as me. So I've got my own personal login. The super advanced thing, go to folders. Hover over the little meatballs on the left-hand side, under your personal folders. Add folder. And then you can make them at different levels, right? So you can make an accounting class and make another folder under them. So that's going to be one way to know if you're in your account.
If you can add a folder, then you must be in your account.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay, then I'm signing on. I created it.
So you must be in your account.
Yep. So what I didn't see in here, like they don't have, from what I've seen, is something that reflects you, right?
Yeah.
There's like, hi, Jennifer,
Yeah,
welcome.
a circle with your initials. or
Yeah.
something, yeah.
You've got sign in, sign out. Yep. So thank you for that. Now you can also see, right? Because I'm in my account, I can see my whole history of things I've been searching. So you can tell it the practice area, but you also have, let's deal with if I already have a citation, because your accountant partner gave you a specific citation. There's a link right here called citation and other search tools. So if I hit citation and other search tools, it brings me to a screen where on the left-hand side, I can search by code and regulations. Remember, we had what was called a revenue regulation. And we could browse down here for examples, TD, temporary regulations, but that's not quite it. If we go down to rulings and IRB, we get an example, rev rule, revenue rulings. And once again, for a new researcher, it is a leap to know that, okay? So I want to give you some hints. So revenue rulings are under rulings IRB. Let's pop back to the case. Let me go backwards here. And it's Rev Rule 8026. So I don't have to put in Rev Rule. I can just put in 80-26. Hit search.
Jen is saying, this, unless you're experienced, or you get a hint from someone like me, you're not gonna know where to go. Well, you're gonna do other
Yeah.
things first, but it's worthwhile if you know where you wanna head to. Oh, that case, or that ruling, let me see what it says. So that's why we're giving you the specific skill set to go look at a particular.
Yeah. Because our partner, in this case, your professor, is giving us a hint that Rev Rule 8026 is going to have something to do with some idea in this case. Okay. So then if we go to Rev Rule 8026, now we're also learning how to read these things. And so this, I put a note in here. I put notes to myself. I love this ruling. Get the note. Wow, that's so funny. Hide the notes. Hide the notes. So Rev Rule 8026, reconfirming that we are in there. And then we get sort of like the executive summary. Now notice as I highlight that, I can do things. I can highlight it and add a note, okay? Again, the great thing about having your own account is I know a lot of people will work with a computer and a piece of paper, but you can do a lot of your work right in the product. And you can save all this info. You can email selected text. You can copy the text. That's going to become important because you're going to be offering him documentation that is proving your thoughts. I really think it works this way. Here's the paragraph I was reading and how I interpret it, and you'll hand that off to him in a form that he'll describe to you how he wants it. You get the full text, and this is also a little bit how cases work. Well, what was the issue at hand? And in this case, the rules of arbitration under Section 318 of Internal Revenue Code, blah, blah, blah. Now notice right where it says Section 318, there's a little green document that's actually a live link. So I talked about all these documents being connected to each other in this product. That's exactly what's happening. We're looking at a revenue regulation issued by the US Treasury to help with some interpretation. And it's letting us know this revenue regulation is related to Section 318. And I can click on the little green document. It opens up a new tab. And it takes me now into what? I am in the IRC code now. So up on the top, it's going to give you the subject of what you're looking at and what library you're in. What set of documents are you in? I'm going to flip back here and it tells me I'm in Revenue Rule 8026, Revenue Rulings. I'm in the Revenue Rulings library here. I'm in the IRC code for constructive ownership of stock. All right. Now that doesn't say anything right now about family hostility or family arbitration. Because when you look at the laws, they break them down into these little tiny particles. So now I'm like, oh, I need to save this. How do I save it? I've got a little download button right here. I can save it to the folder. I'm going to hit save as. It's going to ask me what folder did you want this to go in. Oh, I totally want this to go into my accounting 710 folder. Save it. I can add a note. Better read this. Now, that's not likely the note you'll leave for yourself. You would leave a note that probably says only about ownership, but look at subsection blah blah blah. Because you're making cognitive choices on the fly while you're navigating through here. Now, even as I navigate through here, there's a little FTC button, Federal Tax Coordinator. So what's happening is this idea about general rules of construction ownership, I can jump into the Federal Tax Coordinator, or wait, my issue had to do with a family. I can jump over into the Federal Tax Coordinator to see what the FTC is saying about constructive ownership of stock and families. The spouse was legally separated, blah, blah. Oh, wait, that sounds like my problem. Now, why is that highlighted? Because I highlighted it when I was practicing earlier in the week. That's not, you know how like when you search in like one of the new AI tools, it'll pull out stuff? That's only highlighted because I highlighted it earlier this week. But that's why it becomes helpful to be able to highlight things and then continue to save them. Okay, so let's pop back to the federal. So you can search by citation. You can also search, and let's search in the Federal Tax Coordinator analysis. Use your quotation marks to keep phrases together. Let's search for family hostility. Hostility. Now notice what it's doing. It's like, hey, and this product's used AI way before ChatGPT came about. This is a highly professional product. It's not using generative AI. It's using another form of AI to help understand within the tax code that it looks at what researchers want to see. And it's like, hey, I think you might also want to look at family hostility and family attribution. So you just click that and hit search. And right now we're only searching in the Federal Tax Coordinator. Let's say I was done with the Federal Tax Coordinator. I could say, you know what? I really need to get on this. I've got, meetings all day long. I'm going to search for those phrases in the federal tax cases. Hit search. So now it's only searching the court cases for things related to those phrases. And check that out. Cerrone, Metzger, that sounds awfully familiar. Why does that sound familiar? Because our partner was pointing us to both of these cases. So I didn't even have to look up in the citator if it was these cases. Okay, awesome. Open them up, save them to your folders that you're using. And cases are written in their own way. So cases have a head note usually, which is basically, here are the main elements of the law and how we came to our opinion. Here is the syllabus of what has happened. So-and-so and his son, we're doing this, that, and the other thing. And notice, we've got individual links throughout the document, not just to 318, but to other sections of the code. So let's see what 302 is dealing with. 302 of the Internal Revenue Code is about, on the top part, distributions and redemption of stock. Awesome. I gotta remember to underline these things. And it's pointing to 317, and it's like a thread. You just keep going through, except it's like a spider web that's also a house of mirrors. Because you're like, am I looking forward? Am I looking backward? Did I look at this? When did I look at that? And that's one of the things that accountants learn to do, just like lawyers learn to do. How to read and skim through these things very fast, how to understand which thing has more authoritative than another thing. The editorial secondary materials aren't as authoritative. They're not really authoritative at all. They are navigators. But the IRC code is authoritative. Tax cases are authoritative. You do want to be careful on tax cases to make sure they haven't been overturned, and that it's the latest case. The opinion to the cases will be down on the bottom. I believe if they were overturned, you would get little red flags, but I'll have to follow up on that. And the opinions will be all the facts, and then the judge will also get into the individual issues. It is possible that a case that you were pointed to has multiple issues, and maybe only one issue is related to your problem that is in front of you. So you have to have patience. Once you get to your destination, you have to have patience as you go through it and you're ingesting it. Okay. So multiple ways to search in here, multiple ways to save information, highlight information, copy it, etc. And then you're going to keep playing through as the documents connect to each other. So one of the things we do want you to do for a few minutes is we want you to go in. It doesn't matter if you go into your own personal account or the general account. And we want you to take some facts of the case, and I'll put the facts of the case up on the screen. And we want you to spend about 4 minutes searching. And then I'm going to call on people to report back. Where did you search? Was it in the tax court? Did you go into the IRC? Were you in the federal tax coordinator? Pick a library to go in, a federal library to go into. Where did you search? What were your search terms? And what in general did you find? Okay. You can also search under the citation tool or for searching for words. Does everyone know how to navigate to the general account for Checkpoint? Everyone's in Checkpoint. Anybody not in Checkpoint? Raise your hand. Okay, awesome. There is your problem statement with the different facts, a couple documents to navigate to directly if you want to. If you navigate directly to one of the cases using that, do me a favor and read maybe the very first few sections quickly to sort of just say what they were doing in those sections. Okay, and I'm going to set my timer for 4 minutes on my watch. And go.
Got it.